Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
Back here on the Northland Sports Page, hour number 2, bumping in with a little foxy lady. We used to use this one for our next guest all the time when she was part of Fox 21 in Duluth. Still certainly a wonderful lady, though. Claudia Chakamian is with us. She's moved well south of Duluth. She's now working in TV news in the state of Alabama, but she's an alum of the University of South Carolina, so I know where her mind is going to be tomorrow afternoon.
Well, how about the combination of basketball in her mind when you've got the alum and the state school in the Final Four?
Right. She should be in Phoenix if you ask her, I'm sure, but we get to ask her lots of fun stuff today. Let's welcome her first. Claudia Chakamian, good morning and happy Saturday to you.
Good morning. How you guys? It's great to be back talking in the Duluth airways, talking with you guys. I've missed you guys, but yeah, very busy in my basketball mind right now.
No doubt, no doubt. It's great to hear your voice as well. It has been way too long. Let's talk about something we brought up on this show earlier, but I have to bring it up to you because I'm going to guess that you agree. For some reason, South Carolina is an undefeated team that is supposedly under the radar right now because last night's UConn-Iowa game gets all the headlines, and we understand why. There's a difference between a one-possession game and a 19-point game, but it's not just last night. I feel like if you're not talking about Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark, you're not talking about the sport. And I've told everybody who will listen, I just don't think it'll matter who wins the UConn-Iowa game. The South Carolina team is so good, but because they don't have the first-name basis players, and maybe they should. We could talk about, Camilla and some others. But why is South Carolina under the radar? They certainly shouldn't be.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel like I will also talk about with anyone that will listen, is that what South Carolina is doing this season is incredible. And maybe I'm a little biased, but it's going under the radar and nobody's talking about it. They're undefeated with an entire new starting lineup, a lot of new players as well, and it's just not going it's going unnoticed. And again, you mentioned Camila Cardoso. She's a top 5 pick for this year's WNBA draft. So they do have that star, that player that, should have the attention of everyone, but nobody's talking about it. And I think it's just because of what Caitlin Clark has been able to do the past few years, pulling up from the logo. It's getting basketball fans that maybe haven't been watching. They're like, oh, this is pretty cool. Let me watch. And she deserves it. She's a great player. She's done great things for the game. And now we're starting to see other players do it as well. Paige, she's been great since she stepped onto the scene. Juju Watkins, she had an incredible year at the other USC, the fake one in my mind.
Right.
But there's so many great players out there. And I just hope, Paige said it in her press conference the other day, that somebody was like, you're going to be the focal point next year. And she's like, I don't really want to be. I want women's basketball as a whole to get the attention. It shouldn't just be on one player. It should be on everyone. And I wish South Carolina was getting that recognition. But you know what? That's fine. Go into tomorrow. Don't have the attention and go win the Natty.
I agree with you because I've said it too, that Caitlin Clark, although she's playing, feels a little bit like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift got a lot of people that weren't recognizing the sport involved in the NFL. But suddenly if you weren't cheering for the Chiefs, what's wrong with you? If you're not cheering for Iowa, I feel like you're treated the same way. But you said it so well, Claudia. There's tons of other players and teams worth cheering for if you bothered to follow this long enough or well enough. And that's the step I hope some of these new fans take, is don't just get invested in one player, get invested in the sport. Speaking of being invested in the sport, I'm going to ask you what I think is a very difficult question because I tried to ask myself and I struggled with it. I know you're biased, but I'm going to give you 3 coaches in the history of women's basketball, and I want you to rank them for me. Dawn Staley, Gino Auriemma, and the late, great Pat Summitt. Rank them 1 through 3.
I just think that if you're looking at, and I knew who the 3 were going to be before you finished even asking the question, but I think at this point right now, you got to go Pat, then you got to go Gino, then you got to go Dawn. And because I think Dawn's still building. Dawn's done some great things. She's only won 2 national championships. I wouldn't say that she's at that dynasty level that Gino has created and that Pat created. And I think Dawn says it too. She looks up to still what Pat Summitt was able to do and what Gino has continued to build. And Gino said it last night. He was like, wow, we don't win a national championship for a few years. We're bad. no, Gino still has one of the best programs in the country. And I just saw next year's number 1 overall recruit just committed to UConn. So if they stay healthy next year, they're going to be back. And Gino just continues to build. And until he retires, he's still, I think, what everyone is still chasing. And I think Dawn's one of the greatest coaches. I love her, and I don't know how anyone wouldn't want to play for her. But I think, she's building something really special. And if she continues to do what she has done over the past decade, there's no doubt that those are the top 3 women's basketball coaches ever.
Yeah, that's absolutely well said. I brought that up, Dave, because I keep thinking to myself, I wish Pat Summitt was around to see what women's basketball is becoming or has become. It's a shame, obviously, that we lost her as early as we did, but you look at how much she did for the game, and this had to be kind of what she had in mind.
Well, certainly, and you guys hit it on the head. Kaylin's been great, but the goal here has to be the larger picture for women's basketball. And we were talking, Claudia, before the show, that the Gopher women are now in the NIT championship game. And that's the type of thing where Kaylin Clark has brought so much attention that this Minnesota Gopher team, if they go out and win this thing, all of a sudden they're going to have additional eyes on them because, wow, look at in this sport, we also succeeded. And I think that's when it starts to germinate, is when people notice their own teams are successful.
For sure. And also just with the Kaylin Clark thing, she didn't win that game last night. Hannah Sulke was the star of that game. So I just think if you look at the teams, Kaylin's a great player, but Iowa has more players than just her, and they should be recognized as well. I just, I want that for women's basketball.
I agree with you. I thought Sulke did great things. I thought Kate Martin did some great things. Some would argue that Gabby Soldakal that won the game, and I want to bring that up because after the game ended last night, you and I were texting about it, and you knew I was more than a little miffed, but I couldn't take off my UConn fandom as I was looking at that call. And then I texted you again this morning, and I said, the more I look at it, the less upset I am. And you shot me back. I still don't like it. So you're a very seasoned women's basketball mind. Take me through your interpretation of it.
So I was on the air last night when this happened. So I didn't get to watch it live. I just came out of my sportscast and I walked back into my office and I saw Andrea Carter just talking about how unhappy she was. And I was like, well, I got to see what happened. Didn't get to watch the whole game, so I didn't get to see how it was officiated. And I know Gino said they called them for, illegal screen a few times during the game, and they didn't get Iowa. So you question about that sometimes. But looking at it and looking at different angles, you can make the argument that, yes, it was the correct call, but you need to call it then every single time. And you need to call it throughout the entire game. You can't just decide in that moment. And I think that's just what's hard, is you can make the argument for both. You can't just change the rule book because it's 3 seconds left with a 1-point game, or I think that's what it was at that point.
Right.
You can't change it up, but then also let the players play. So I see both sides of it. I don't like it. And, I don't like that. Andrea said perfectly. I want to see the players make it. If Paige misses a shot as time expires, then that's how it ends, and that's fine. Or if she makes it, that's fine, or whoever. But I wanted to see it end that way. I don't want to see it end on a bad call. Now, Iowa sealed it by getting that rebound after Caitlin missed that second free throw.
Correct.
But, so it's, maybe ball don't lie. And, they say it all the time. But it's hard to sit with however you feel that that's kind of how the game was sealed.
Brian, I think it's interesting because I think Claudia hit it on the head that if everybody is mad about this call, might have been the right call, just at the wrong time.
Well, I agree with you there, too. And I said this in the car on the way here. I said, it might have been right. It might not have been right. But I think if it's not obvious, and obvious isn't the same as egregious. Yep. They're not the same. I'm more of a when in doubt, leave it out guy. But again, everything that I've said, I might as well say with a UConn sweatshirt on. And I will acknowledge that. There was no question who I wanted to win that game last night. Let me ask you this, though, Claudia, and I brought it up to Dave Hoops earlier, too. A lot of people said on social media last night, boy, it's a shame that a great game is now going to be just remembered for a call. And I agreed with it at first. Not the call, but the thought of that. And then I kind of took a step back and went, well, but isn't this wonderful? Because we've talked about the growth of the game. Sports is made for water cooler topics. This game is going to be a water cooler topic for a long time. That should add to the staying power of women's basketball. What's your take on that?
It does, and people are going to remember this game, whether it's for, Iowa's comeback, whether it's for the ending, whatever they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about this semifinal game because, as much as I love my Gamecocks, they won by 19. It wasn't that exciting. It was a nerve-wracking first half for me, but, that wasn't the story. And Iowa and UConn, as we hoped, showed out and gave fans a really great game. And yeah, I think that that's what people are going to remember, but at least we're going to talk about it. And at least, hopefully everyone's going to tune in on Sunday for a really good game, and hopefully the officials just stay out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to see 8-on-5 either direction. I tweeted as much last night.
It is WrestleMania weekend, though, so maybe you'll get that done.
Go Royal Rumble on it?
Yeah, you'll get that. No referees, just take it apart.
Let's talk a little bit about what lies ahead Sunday, because again, South Carolina somehow has been slightly overlooked, maybe not to the folks that know the game inside and out, but to the new arrivals of fans, it's all about Caitlin or Paige or what have you. South Carolina's post-dominance is really something.
Yes.
And speaking of something I said on Twitter, I want to talk about something you said on Twitter. This was something you said last night after your stressful first half. You called it a traditional quarter by South Carolina. Well, that tradition is really something then, because I think the third quarter was somewhere around like 29-6. This Gamecocks team has the ability to just blow a game open, don't they?
They do, and that's the thing that can also hurt them, is that sometimes they start off really, really well, and then they take their foot off the gas. That's what we saw in the Tennessee game in the SEC Championship semifinal, where Camilla hit that three-pointer, and I lost my marbles. So, they can do that, or they don't start off very well. They had a lot of turnovers in that first half last night. They seemed kind of nervous to be on that stage. Then Don Staley said something at halftime in the locker room, and then they came out and went on a 29-6 run in that third quarter. So they have this thing where they don't play in a complete game, and they're winning, and clearly it's working, so it's okay. But, I don't think they can do that against Iowa. They can't take their foot off the gas. They can't play sloppy. They have to play a really complete, solid game if they want a chance to be the ones to win that national championship, I believe.
So, Claudia, I'm going to take that as a period on that conversation, and I want to switch it to the team you currently cover. We've been talking about this UConn men's team as this monolith that's gonna run roughshod, and so far so good, right? I'm wondering if Alabama has a shot today against UConn. I think so.
I have no idea. I mean, I was at the SEC tournament in Nashville a few weeks ago, which feels like a year ago at this point, when Alabama looked absolutely awful against Florida. I was doing a live hit, and I just kept looking at my phone being like, what is happening? This is disgusting. Like, this Alabama team is going to lose in the first round. Like, they're not going to make it out of the first weekend. Well, here they are. So don't we all look stupid? They are just playing a completely different basketball than we have seen them play really this entire season. They're a fun team to watch because Nate Oates loves, a fast-paced offense. They love to shoot the threes, but their defense has been a problem. It hasn't been in the tournament. The way that they were able to slow down North Carolina, what they were able to do, really this entire run has been really impressive. And if they're able to play that way on defense, I think they have a chance. I think what they need to do is just not put up bad shots, because sometimes, Nate Oates says don't pass up an open look. Sometimes they're putting up shots they shouldn't put up and they're missing, and they get into a run where they're just missing 7-8 threes in a row, and then they find themselves down. So they need to take some smarter shots, because that's something that Nate Oates said UConn does a really good job of, is they don't take bad shots. And that's, on the last game against Illinois, they only made three-pointers, but they were getting it done all around the court. So I just think Alabama needs to limit their shot selection and not put up some bad shots, and they might be able to hang in there. Now, again, UConn's been a buzzsaw, so if they end up winning by 30, don't come at me. But weirder things have happened, but give me the chaos. Give me Alabama, NC State in the championship. Why not?
That would be interesting, and I'll tell you what, if UConn wins by 30, you can come at Dave again, because last week on this show he said to me, I think Illinois beats them today, but if they don't, UConn wins the whole thing. Well, fast forward after a 30-point win, and now Dave's trying to tell me that UConn loses to Bama today. So he does reserve the right to change his mind. I'm still getting past the idea of we want Bama doesn't just pertain to football anymore. It's interesting for me. Catching up with Claudia Chakamian, former Fox 21 sports anchor, who now works in television news in Alabama. Take us through kind of a day in the life for you now, because I'm assuming climate change is real. I get that. But I'm assuming that you're not dealing with spring sports snowed out in late March
No.
like we did up here.
No, and it's funny. I was shooting college baseball yesterday, and it was maybe like upper 50s and windy, and everyone was freezing. And they're like, "Oh my God, it's so cold." I was like, "Can we calm down? Like, this feels great." So yeah, spring sports have been really going this whole time. You know, we don't have to worry about our college teams playing in Florida for the first month and a half of the season, like we had to in Duluth. So it's very busy, and it's interesting because I felt like in Duluth I didn't really have to balance the winter-spring crossover. Here we really do, especially now, again, with Alabama playing into the first weekend of April. It's really a balance. And, later today, we've got the spring games for two of our colleges. Auburn has theirs, and Alabama A&M has theirs. So we're also getting into football, but it's very busy. I feel like also with Nick Saban retiring, I really have not slowed down since the start of football season. So it's been very busy. It's a lot of fun, though. The high schools are really great here in all sports. The colleges are great. We have 3 local colleges plus Alabama and Auburn. So I really don't get any downtime. But, I mean, when you work in sports, what is downtime,
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. Speaking of which, I love the weather story you told that you didn't forget your Minnesota time in TV and say, hey, the 50s and a light wind, that's just fine. But going back to your time in Duluth in sports, in TV, the trio of you, Chelsea Brown, and Alicia Tipke technically were network rivals, but your friendships were awesome to be a part of and awesome to watch. And now I'm seeing them take a different type of rivalry because you're getting some flack. Everybody knows you're cheering for South Carolina against Iowa. We've already talked to Chelsea Brown, and her husband Eric isn't quiet about it either with their Hawkeye fandom. Yeah. Are you having fun playfully with a new rivalry with them?
Well, Eric's coming at me on Twitter.
I saw it
or whatever last night, and I was like, Eric, you know where I went to school. Come on, let's be quiet. But no, I love Chelsea, and I'm so proud of her being 7 months pregnant, covering the Final Four national championship right now. So super proud of her, and obviously I don't really want her to be happy tomorrow, but really cool that she gets to be there for the second year in a row covering her alma mater and in the stage, and we had some fun. And I'm going to be quiet until after the game tomorrow because I don't want to jinx anything. You should have the last laugh. Yeah, because I was a little too confident, I think, last year, and then I had to, come to her with my tail between my legs, I feel like. But no, we definitely have fun with it, and we talk all the time, on the phone during the season just about women's basketball. And she's kind of said the same thing. South Carolina's not getting enough credit, and Iowa's getting probably a little too much sometimes. So definitely, we talk about it all the time, and I'm still super close with both of them, and I'm super thankful that Duluth brought me both of those, and I'm hoping that I can make a trip to Iowa this summer to meet Baby T.
I think that they should change that, Brian, and there should be a bet on the table on the game, and that should be South Carolina wins. Claudia names the kid.
Ooh, I do like that. See if you can put that on the table. Speaking of putting something on the
Eric
table.
did tell me I get to be goddaughter or godmother, so I got that already.
Perfect. So speaking of putting something on the table, we know who you want. Who you got? Who do you really think, if you had to make a prediction and you had to be right, who wins the women's natty? Who wins the men's?
For the women, I'm not going against South Carolina. I just think they are the best team. They have the depth. They have the three-point shooting. Bree Hall said in the press conference today that 2 days after last year's natty, she came to Dawn Staley and said, we need to get three-point shooting. That hurt us against Iowa. And now here they are. They have, they added Tina Pow. They have Malaysia Fulwiley. They have Raven Johnson, who's upped her game, and she is on a revenge tour herself. So I really think they have, and then obviously then you got Camila Cardoso, you got Ashton Watkins, you got Chloe Kitts inside. So I just really think they are the most well-rounded team, and they're going to have to hurt themselves to lose, I believe. And then just please don't let Caitlin Clark drop 40. Please, I'm begging. So I'm going for South Carolina. I think that they're going to have to play bad to lose. For the men, I really have no idea. I picked UConn for my bracket. I thought that their toughest challenge when I looked at the bracket was going to be Auburn, but again, joke's on me. So I don't know. I feel like the winner of the Alabama-UConn game is going to win the national championship because I don't think Purdue is that great, and NC State, their Cinderella, I think, is going to run out at some point. So give me UConn for the men, but I'll be happy if Alabama makes it, and I wish I was in Phoenix.
There you go. I can appreciate that. We've thought alike before. We're predicting the same winners as well. Always a winning conversation when we get to talk to you. I appreciated it. Let's do this again soon. Last night felt like normal, texting you late about sports.
Yes, it was great. Great catching up with you guys. I miss Duluth. Stay warm out there because I think it's so cold.
Absolutely. We miss you. That's Claudia Chakamian, formerly of Fox 21, now just giving us everything we'd want to know about college basketball and specifically the South Carolina women's team that should be your national champion tomorrow afternoon. Stick around. Vencie Glenn is next. We will be right back.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
Back on the Northland Sports page, Men Without Hats doing the safety dance. We do it just about every week. It's the Drawing Line segment courtesy of Arolla Architecture Studio featuring Vencie Glenn. Once again, he's right around the corner, but we mentioned the OG, Ryan Arolla of Arolla Architecture Studio, bringing you Drawing Lines. Every sponsor helps bring us this show. We couldn't do it without him.
Absolutely, Brian. Let's start with Kraus Heating and Cooling, your Carrier HVAC authorized dealer. OAR Holdings, Advantage Emblem and Screen Printing, Kohler Hyundai and Kohler Toyota, Comfort Systems of Duluth, Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies, Mount Royal Bottle Shop, the Blackwoods Group, including their locations in 2 harbors, in Proctor, Tavern on the Hill, Blackwater right downtown here on London Road, Mike Regan at Christensen Group Insurance, Hoops Brewing, and as you said, the OG, Arolla Architecture Studio.
He brings us drawing lines each and every week. We love to draw our lines with Vencie Glenn because he will draw them just about anywhere on any topic. I know he wanted to get on last week to put some salt on the wound of Indiana State beating the Gophers in the men's NIT, but the Sycamores did not win it. They fell by 2 to Seton Hall in the final. I imagine Vencie's recovered from that, but if he hadn't, he'd be all over us today. Let's see what he brings. Good morning, 25. How we doing?
Good morning, guys. I'm in better spirits. It took me. Yesterday was a tough day for me. I don't like losing. It takes a while for me to get over losing, but we played hard, and I was proud of them in the way they played and performed.
Well, and I have to think the table should be set for next season. We always talk about, these teams that do well in the NIT should be a springboard to the NCAA. Now, I had already said they should have made it this year, but I would think Sycamore basketball, the future is pretty bright.
Well, I think it's really going to help recruiting just in Indiana, the state alone, and the surrounding areas. And guys know that when they come there, they got a chance to win and play at a high level. It's a good program. So I'm happy for the program because it's all about building for the future. And, we like I said, we did a good job. I'm not mad or anything like that. I'm very proud of them for coming together like they did in such a short time.
Speaking of coming together, Vencie, I'm going to pull it back to Ball. I'm wondering what your take on the Stephon Diggs trade was. I mean, everybody's making him out to be, maybe not the greatest teammate, but the guy can play. Where would you be at if you were on Houston? Would you be in favor of bringing in a guy like this, or would you, we're doing good right now, don't bring that outside influence into our room?
I don't know if you're supposed to say this on the radio, but hell to the year, I would want him on my team. I'm like, are you kidding me? Man, like I said the other day about when we talked about, having somebody else on your team instead of the guys you play with. If a guy wants to come to your team or is traded to your team and he's a ball player, you want him. Because you know that guy, when you watch him throughout films and throughout the league on national TV, he's a baller. He shows up on Sunday. That's all you want. You're not trying to be best friends and classmates and best men in their weddings with these guys. You want to put together a team of men that want to win a championship. They got the nucleus. They got guys down there that want to win, and obviously they brought him in there because he's a guy with good character and wants to win. They do their homework. Teams just don't go get a guy because he can play on the field. If the character's not right for the organization, good organizations ain't going that well. DeMarcus Ryan ain't going to bring that kind of player to his organization if you're not willing to sacrifice and play under the team scope. They interview guys. Everybody's on the interview. They know them. They get news from throughout the league and from other coaches, executives, and they know who guys are and what they're doing off the field. The league knows what you do and what kind of person you are. So if they bring you in like that, that's because they knew that it wasn't good in Buffalo. Buffalo knew it. And they're not getting rid of Josh Allen. And an unhappy Diggs is not going to help the team win. So they do what they do.
Yep.
Well, that's
save some money and try to go get somebody else.
Right. That springboards into exactly what I was going to ask you, because on the other side of this, then what in the world is Buffalo doing? Because you look at their wide receiving core right now, and the three of us might as well try out. We're not going to know who these Buffalo wide receivers are the way it looks for now. It seems like an odd time to kind of be presenting yourself as a rebuild, but they put themselves in salary cap hell as well. A lot of big names have left Buffalo. This is a team that has lived on the doorstep for the last decade or so.
A lot of these organizations have front offices. If you just look at the whole Buffalo, New York Jets, New England Patriots, that's all that bro deal stuff up there. That's all guys coming from around each other, knowing how each other play and stuff. And all Buffalo is saying, hey, we just got to beat New England, the Jets, and the Dolphins and compete with them and have a chance to win, or else we're not going to do anything. So they know they're hurting, but they're not going to get rid of Josh Allen, because that's money off the field too. so it's a business decision. Like I say, NFL's a great game, but it's a terrible business.
Hey, Vencie.
And I don't care if you're the superstar, they'll mistreat you.
Speaking of Josh Allen, I have a quick question for you. I was reading the other day that in the first round, quarterbacks are about a 40 to 50% hit rate. Why? Why do you think coaches and these front offices you were talking about have so much difficulty picking out quarterbacks to draft? I mean, we've talked about play in college, but they should know that by now, shouldn't they?
Because you have scouts and owners that let GMs buy into the thing that all sports are analytics now. They do everything by analytics. Yeah. It's not based off, they call a play based off what production it has on third down in this situation against these defenses. And they'll call a play. It ain't got nothing to do with the flow of the game or what's going on right then and there or who's there. It's all data analytics. And these young coaches and execs come in that's never played at a high level on the field on Sundays and knowing it's different on the field. And a lot of them don't have relationships with the guys in the locker room, and you think you're just watching a guy on film and analytics, and you think those guys can mesh and gel together, but they don't. That's why you can see a team like Houston go from winning 2 or 3 games the year before to going to the playoffs. Man, they just had a bunch of guys that wanted to play together.
Right.
That's sports. That's no rocket science.
So since it's not rocket science, it's because you made a great point. It's penthouse to outhouse and back again, depending upon how the locker room is. You mentioned the NFL is not necessarily a great business all the time, and everything should be settled on the field, but it's draft season per se. So there's a lot of business taking center stage. How much of this posturing can we really buy into? Because teams are flexing that they're really into this player, this player, this player, and I'll contend we're not going to know anything until a few Thursdays from now.
Well, if you're talking about the draft, that's what they do. Most teams are communicating with each other. You know, the top 5 might be playing games and saying they're one thing and going to do another just to kind of keep the opposition at bay. But it's basically your needs. Most teams go out and get what they need. And here's what I learned the other day from one of my buddies that's a scout in the league, and I'm not going to mention the team. The teams that are successful pretty much year in and year out, it's not about the starters. They got backups that can compete. That's why they don't lose a lot when they lose starters, and they don't worry about a guy wanting a whole lot of money and don't mind sending them down the road, because they got guys behind them that want to compete and get on the field. So if you got guys in the locker room behind your starters that want to compete, your starters are going to play at a high level. They're going to play at a high level because they know if the backup tackle or the backup linebacker, he's hungry. He want to play. And he's pretty damn good, too. I just happen to be the
Right.
starter, so how do I keep my job? And so you have to have a strong backup crew of guys that really want to get on the field and play as well. So your starters will keep playing at a high level and won't get comfortable.
That brings a great perspective, because I was going to ask you, and I'm going to go ahead and say, when you were a veteran in the league and your team was on the clock or drafting, did you pay attention to it much? And if you did you pay attention to it to see who are we getting that's going to help this team? Or was it the perspective that you just talked about? Who am I going to have to keep from taking my job? What was your take on when your team was selecting?
I'll give it to you. I'll give the second to the last question first. I never worried about nobody taking my job because I knew wasn't nobody out there good enough to beat me, outplay me. I was never going to lose my job because you had to play at a high level to take my job. I wasn't just a player. You have to, if you're smart and you play well and hard and you're a leader, it's hard for somebody to take your job. It's hard. What are they going to, I mean, if you playing good and they like take players that play good, you don't have to play great. Just do your job. I did my job. I did my job at a high level. I help other people do their job at a high level. Why am I worried about who coming on? All I did was when you show up to training camp, can you play on Sunday? That's football. I don't get into the social media. Now it's more social media. Back then, it wasn't. And they didn't care about who was this and who was that. You're a rookie. You'd be lucky if you made the team. Let's not talk about starting and making millions and being the face of the NFL. You'd be hoping you make the team. That's how it was.
Just when I thought I couldn't love Vencie anymore, you say something like that. Go ahead. I'm loving this.
It's a different game now. And so I look at it through the lens of why these guys don't succeed opposed to why they should succeed. Because I keep telling people, it's locker room. When you see teams with a lot of talent don't win, man, their locker room is messed up. I don't care what sport it is. And I said last year when Padres had a great team and couldn't win. Man, that's locker room. Period.
Vencie, I'm going to take you off the gridiron for a second. I got I got classrooms I go to, and we were talking in a classroom the other day to high school kids about social media and how to pay attention to what they're writing now because it might come back and bite them as a professional someday, whether it's sports or business. What kind of suggestions, what kind of thoughts do you have to our high school kids that are listening about social media, which you were just talking about?
He's just going to say don't use it. He doesn't, but go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say read all you want, but get away from that posting.
That makes sense.
It's the posting that gets people. It's what people post. You can read about other people. You can get information and make your own decisions about what people are doing or what you should do or trying to get some information. Information is available. How you use it is what's bad. It's not the information you get. That's why data analytics is good. Nothing wrong with it. But when you use it, it's going to say whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And so you putting stuff out there because of your emotions and feelings that come and go, and that's just the way you feel at that moment, and that lasts with you because of those are your words. And so you can't say, I didn't say it, I didn't post it. What were you meaning? Now you got to explain. And they always say, if you don't complain, you don't have to explain. So, you just keep things from where you got to complain, and so you don't have to explain.
It's great advice, Brian.
I think it's a great point because I think of, what if social media existed decades ago? What would have been different? And the way Vencie describes his locker rooms is I feel like there would have been somebody that would have pinned somebody against their locker and say, what are you doing? We don't do that here. I don't feel like that's present enough now in today's game because everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
Who's going to call you out on it when everybody's on it?
I'll tell you one thing about social media back in the day. There's been a whole lot more fights and killings in the world, man, because people ain't play that meddling stuff. Your parents used to tell you don't be nosy. What go on in your house, stay in your house. Yep. So if being gossip, man, people didn't like that. Social media is another word for gossip, period, in the conversation.
It really is. There's a reason keyboard warrior exists as a term.
Yeah, think about this when you're a kid. If it wasn't in your neighborhood, you didn't know about it. Till you maybe went to school and somebody told you it happened. You just didn't know about it if it wasn't in your neighborhood. You didn't consume yourself. If I'm in Iowa, what somebody writing over in Miami, it's just another world. So now it's where you can bring the world together, but people don't know how to separate their reality from what they read, and that's the problem.
Absolutely. This was related to sports, but I think we feel that way about social media when it comes to politics as well. I don't remember during, one of the Bush administrations, during the Clinton administration, everybody having an opinion on what our president or presidential candidates were doing.
Yeah.
You can't escape that now. It's just a different world altogether. One of the best parts of our world, Vencie Glenn, is, of course, getting you to be part of it. Not closing the show today. You moved up a segment. We appreciate you being able to do that. That allowed me to pick different bump out music for you, too. I took an old Chicago song called 25 or 624. Tell you what, give me 2-5 all day long. We appreciate you, buddy.
Hey, man, love you guys, man. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks,
Thank
Vencie.
you.
We love you, too. We'll talk to you
All right,
very
guys.
soon. That is our guy, Vencie Glenn. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Thank you.
Vencie Glenn, moving up a segment. He's flexible for us, too. There's nothing that guy won't do to be part of our show.
Isn't that nice?
We love it.
It's good to have friends. It's good to have friends on the show, and Vencie hits both.
Speaking of friends being on the show, we'll have one more to close it. Rickert, former Greyhound, former Gopher, talks men's hoops with us. Stick around, the Northland Sports Page, one segment to go. We will be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Ramp. Are you the decision maker in your company? Consider this. For the first time in decades, there's a better option for a corporate card and spend management platform. Meet Ramp, the only corporate card and spend management system designed to help you spend less money so you can make more. Most corporate credit cards offer points as incentives, but those points amount to less than their worth in real cash value. Ramp's business cards offer you cash back, real money in your pocket. Plus, you control who spends what with each vendor. And Ramp's software collects and verifies receipts automatically, which means you'll stop wasteful spending and close your books in hours instead of days. Businesses that use Ramp add up to 5% to their bottom line the first year. If you're a decision maker, adding Ramp could be one of the best decisions you've ever made. And now get $250 when you join Ramp for free. Just go to ramp.com/easy. Ramp.com/easy. RAMP.com/easy.
Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members of FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
Back on the Northland Sports Page, Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, final segment, little history repeating. The UConn men are going to try to do just that. Men's Final Four, that's tonight. You got Purdue with NC State, and you've got UConn, and we want Bama, not just a football statement anymore.
And South Carolina, right? History repeating.
Right. If they're able to do it on the women's side, it will be interesting. And we'll see what Rickert, former Gopher, former Greyhound, has to say about that. Speaking of history repeating, definitely a repeat guest on our show.
Absolutely. It's good to have Rick on again. It's good to reconnect with part of Duluth's history, frankly.
Absolutely. Anytime we need more dynamite basketball takes, he is my go-to, my good buddy for all these years. Rickert, good morning, my friend.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you. And what's your thought on this Final Four? Because NC State, just like they were some 4 decades ago, would be the Cinderella story if they can pull it off. Purdue's interesting to me because if they do this, it's going to become the new recipe. Lose to a 16 seed and then go win it, because I believe Virginia did that too. UConn's the favorite. And then Bama's essentially, if you talk to folks out in that market like we did earlier in this hour, not supposed to be here either.
Yeah. Well, you look at NC State. That's a very interesting one right there, because they're an 11th seed right there. You want to see the Cinderella story do well. At the same time, UConn, in my opinion, the overwhelming favorite at this point. They've got a really good team. So I'm most intrigued by Purdue. Zach Edey, my goodness, he's a freaking monster. 7'4", just, back-to-back Big Ten Player of the Year, back-to-back National Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, he's a big boy. He's 7'4", really big post presence. Very, very intrigued to see these games happen at the Final Four. I watched the women's Final Four yesterday too. I watched Caitlin Clark go at it. She's been in the news lately. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yeah, her and some Swift gal are always on my news feeds.
Yeah, right. Her and some Swift gal. Yeah, who are they?
Right, no idea. Please continue.
Oh no, I was just saying it's been a great year for basketball, especially women's basketball. I don't want to get off the men's Final Four, but I mean, good for them. They're just killing it. So it's unbelievable to see. Really good to see the game grow.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm going to let you talk further about women's basketball. And those that have tuned in for the majority of almost our 2 hours now, we've spent the majority of that time talking about women's basketball today. I got to know if you saw the end of UConn and Iowa, your thoughts on the last illegal screen call, because the debate on social media is real right now.
Okay. So, You know my feeling on referees. I mean, it's so subjective, but I did watch the entire game. I watched the screen call. I thought that was a travesty right there. That was not that. I mean, even if you could have called it, it was so minor. It should not have been called in a crucial point in the game like that. And with that said, I don't even think it was. I mean, she had her elbows up when she was setting the screen. It looked like, maybe you could have made an argument. I thought it was a really, really terrible call. That was the game right there. Cause I was talking with my wife. I was like, UConn's going to get it. And then they call that and I'm like, what? They didn't even get an opportunity.
I agree with you, and I had multiple friends that are just new to the sport, and they're Caitlin Clark fans, and they're texting, yes, she's so great, what a run for Iowa. And I texted back an expletive that I can't say about an offensive foul call, and you can't call that there. And it's not really that I wanted to say you can't call that there, because I'm not a believer in that the rules should change based on the time remaining or the closest of the score. But it's
that's a valid point. That's a valid point. And yes, you're right. You're right.
But to me, it's like calling holding in football. There's the old adage that you can call it on every play. It's possible that you could call that type of screen illegal on almost every single play, and the game is much different. So again, you've been around referees forever. I'm a firm believer, and you get a feel for how they're calling the game. Is it, boy, they're letting them play, or boy, this is tight? And last night's game didn't give us really either direction, and then they called that, and I'm frustrated. But I've said it a million times on the show. I was rooting for UConn.
Yeah, I thought the refereeing, for the most part, for the game, I thought it was pretty down the line, which you want to see. That was one that was blatantly not down the line. I won't go as far as saying anything illegal was going on, but I mean that's a pretty crucial call for that time in the game. So I wish it wouldn't have happened like that, but it did. And I was really glad to see Iowa win. I wanted a good game, but I always like to see the Big Ten, teams win it.
So let's go that direction, because Ben Johnson, a former teammate of yours, a friend of yours, had a pretty good season. Now, some people will eye roll that and say, well, how low did you make those expectations? But Gopher basketball, I'm just going to go ahead and say it was fun to watch. Now, will it be next year? I don't know, because we're not there yet. But I also don't know, because we don't know what the roster is going to look like. Rick, we've talked about this before, the transfer portal, the NIL stuff. It's somewhat ruining the sport, but I think that depends on what school you're in, because other schools are doing very well with this. What's your take on the whole equation?
Yeah. So this is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is fantastic that these players are getting an opportunity to make some money other than maybe a scholarship, if they are good enough to get a scholarship. You got walk-ons who are making nothing, right? On the other hand, it is ruining the sport in some regards, because this is going to greatly benefit teams that are in bigger markets, because if someone has a good season, they can transfer, they can go to that bigger market, they can make more money. It's like working up the ladder for your job. You're starting out at McDonald's, and you're working your way up to a Michelin star restaurant or something like that. You're maybe that's a terrible example, but I mean, you're literally working your way up to a bigger market, because that's where the money is. You're not going to go to, the smaller schools are going to suffer more, is what I'm trying to get at. So that's not a good thing. So that's the double-edged sword.
So Rick, you're buddies with Ben, and I wanted to ask it this way. So if you're a team that's struggled, the Gophers have struggled, and you're starting to come around, and some of your players have had a good season, and they're leaving, how does a team like Minnesota get out of the, well, we're not that good, we got to here, and now everybody's left, we're not that good again? How does Ben build on, well, success when everybody that causes success is gone? And so does that mean a team is left in purgatory, or is there a way to build on this?
Yeah, there is a way to build on it. And you know what? I think Minnesota could be the beneficiary of the transfer portal, because they are a bigger market. If we're talking about straight up money and NIL deals and things like that. Minneapolis is a big market. That could potentially be a way to go. But I think first and foremost, you just have to make it fun for the fans, and you have to win. And I know it's easier said than done, but, he had a good step this year. If he can build on that, get some recruits in there. And, I heard that, I can't remember who I was talking to recently, but there was, like, the retention for Minnesota players is like non-existent. Like the top 30 Metro players, you didn't get any of them coming. So that's a way to build your fan base back up, is to get some local, really good, get a Mr. Basketball in there.
Right.
You don't think that's going to drum up some interest, and you don't think you're going to be able to sell out Williams Arena when you retain some of the best players in Minnesota, whether they're the best players on your team, it doesn't matter. You've got some homegrown kids that the locals want to see do well. Recruit at home, get some of the good kids. You're gonna have success. I truly believe that.
I believe it too, but that segues into something I was thinking about early this morning and thought, boy, if I get a chance to ask Rick this, I think I have to. So here I go. So I know that social media, when used properly, is awesome, but when it's not, it's a cesspool. And I saw a tweet today about Paige Beckers that said, "Hey, Minnesota, just remember what Caitlin Clark is doing for Iowa, Paige Beckers could have done for Minnesota, but she chose to go to UConn instead." And I immediately thought of you. You initially chose to go to Arizona, then ended up going to Minnesota. I don't need to necessarily make this about you, but you're welcome to if you want to. But is there too much pressure with good basketball players, specifically in Minnesota, to go to Minnesota? Because I'm sitting here from my perspective going, good for Paige. She's going to arguably the best women's basketball program over the last 30 years instead of trying to put one on the map. You took that pressure on, but is there too much pressure on these college athletes overall?
No, I mean, because at the end of the day, you get to make your own decision with that. So there is a lot of pressure, but I mean, it's the pressure that us as top tier athletes like Paige, she's a phenomenal player, right? We didn't get to where we're at by being soft. We got to where we're at because we have a hard personality and a grinded out personality. So the pressure, people like us, we thrive on that. So I don't think that that's too much of a pressure to ask for a top tier athlete, no matter what sport. That's just my take.
I like that. So I'm going to ask you one last question on the men's Final Four with so much focus being on the bigs. We talked about Zach Edey. UConn's got a dynamite big man. The Burns kid has probably been the most fun story of the NCAA tournament. You're a big that played the game a little differently. You were one of the first to really have a great outside shot for your size. What do you think of this? Because the NCAA tournament right now is looking a little bit more conventional in the big man sense.
Yeah, it is, but I don't like that comment you made. Pretty good shooter from the outside for my size.
Okay, you were just a good shooter. You were just a good shooter. You know I love you. Moving on.
No, yeah, no, it is getting back to that conventional. Cause like you haven't seen like for a while there, it was like, yeah, everybody's out there shooting threes now because that's the way the game's going. Now you got a 7'4" guy who's just dominating and having more of that traditional post presence. I'm wondering if we're seeing the pendulum swing back a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But like some of the bigs, they're staying true to their role and they're not diluting themselves as much to try to fit a specific role. They're getting back to specializing almost. Like you remember Shaq in the 90s when he was Shaq. Couldn't shoot it outside of 5 feet.
Right.
But who's going to stop him, right? And it doesn't seem like anybody can stop Zach Edey, for instance, either, you know?
It certainly does seem that way. Rick, this was amazing. It always is when we get to chat. Say hi to Cece for me. Tell the next Steffi Graf, also known as Pepper, that I say hello. And let's do this again because every time I talk to you, I just know that just means I need more time. We need to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. It goes by too quick. Thanks,
it does.
Guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick.
Absolutely. That's my good friend Rick Rickert. A lot of years back in that friendship, just like ours, Dave Cook. Got to thank a lot of friends today. Thank you to Dave Hoops. Thank you to Claudia Chakamian. Thank you to Vencie Glenn and to Rickert. This was fun.
This was good. This second hour was fantastic.
It was. Everybody enjoy the Final Four weekends. We'll see you next Saturday. Have a great one.
This podcast is sponsored by Ramp. Are you the decision maker in your company? Consider this. For the first time in decades, there's a better option for a corporate card and spend management platform. Meet Ramp, the only corporate card and spend management system designed to help you spend less money so you can make more. Most corporate credit cards offer points as incentives, but those points amount to less than their worth in real cash value. Ramp's business cards offer you cash back, real money in your pocket. Plus, you control who spends what with each vendor. And Ramp's software collects and verifies receipts automatically, which means you'll stop wasteful spending and close your books in hours instead of days. Businesses that use Ramp add up to 5% to their bottom line the first year. If you're a decision maker, adding Ramp could be one of the best decisions you've ever made. And now get $250 when you join Ramp for free. Just go to ramp.com/easy. Ramp.com/easy. RAMP.com/easy.
Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members of FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.